Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to see you all here and in person. We have a series of S.E.E.D talks scheduled for you all this weekend. S.E.E.D stands for Support, Empower, and Engage Our Diaspora. These are TED-style talks that share the stories of our community. I'm excited to introduce our first S.E.E.D talk by Sara Stanizai on how your secrets will set you free. Sara Stanizai is a licensed therapist and owner of Prospect Therapy, a queer and trans-affirming therapy practice with a focus on first-gen and immigrant mental health. Her clinical specialty is at the intersection of immigrant identity development and relationships. Sara is an openly bisexual Afghan-American woman who was born and raised in Los Angeles. She currently runs groups and retreats for Afghan diaspora women of all sexualities, religious affiliations, and gender expressions. To quote Sara herself, "I am so proud that my personal journey and professional career have come together in this way. I want every Afghan in the diaspora to know that you belong. You can be yourself with integrity in every setting that you go to, and there are those of us who celebrate you for all the parts of your identity." So with that being said, please join me in welcoming Sara Stanizai.
I want to celebrate each of you who traveled physical and probably pretty emotional journeys to arrive to this place. I'm already so glad that I took this chance, and I appreciate each of you who did too, because for a lot of reasons, but for most of my life, I was the only Afghan in most rooms, and today I'm not. Today, I'm surrounded by chosen family and probably actual family that I don't know about. And I see queer Afghans around me. And I see those of you who are learning or relearning your native language, your recipes, your dance. I see those of you who are exploring your faith. Those of you who are dedicated to supporting our motherland in any way we can. And for those of you in the room who have ever felt like you weren't being Afghan in the right way, I'm talking directly to you, and I see you because I am you. How many of you are attending AAC for the first time like me? Yay, wow, so many. I feel like the veterans don't come this early. I feel like we were all like, we want to get all of it. How many of you almost didn't come here because you were afraid that you wouldn't be accepted? Yeah, me too. How many of you have hidden or continue to hide parts of your experience, maybe your queerness or your true gender expression, your past abuse or your family secrets, your guilt or your grief? How many of you hide those things out of fear that you won't be believed or that you might be rejected because of them, or even worse, that you have already been cast out because of those things? You don't have to keep raising your hands. I'm not trying to get your whole life story. I'm sorry. How many of you have felt like the only one of you in the room? I have. And I'm standing here to tell you that today you're not the only one. And I think that in itself is really worth celebrating. That's what I want to do by speaking with you today. Like many of the stories I've heard from you over the years, I spent most of my life feeling like I didn't belong, neither here nor there, not Afghan enough, not American correctly. My family didn't understand why I was acting this way. My friends didn't understand why I acted that way. And while many people now see me as this proud Afghan-American, openly bisexual woman, as a successful entrepreneur and practice owner, as a vocal advocate for the marginalized, as a licensed therapist, and a boss to 7 people. Oh my gosh. Is anybody keeping track of how many hair flips I'm doing? I do it when I'm nervous. Okay. What most people don't know is how long it took me to get to this place. And I want you to know that it doesn't happen overnight. So if you are still struggling with your secrets, take your time. I want you to know that this, thank you. I want you to know that this disconnection, this displacement that we're feeling is not your fault. We have been told so many times in so many different ways to hide things about ourselves in order to survive. So I'll share a story with you. In 2010, I had just started my first social service job in my chosen career, and I was very excited. I bought the Gap professional slacks, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a professional now. And I happened to join a conversation with my coworkers, and I realized that they were talking about Afghanistan. Okay, and before I could say anything, I heard them use the word animals to describe us. And my heart stopped. My heart still stops. And the tragic thing is, looking back, my heart didn't stop because I was so offended or outraged. It stopped because I was terrified that they would find out that I was Afghan. And I panicked. I'm sure my face turned red. It always does. Please don't do it right now. My heart raced. I was filled with anger, humiliation, and powerlessness. And what did I do? I just walked away and I didn't say a word. How many times have you held your tongue in situations like that? I had pushed this part of my identity down so much. People were literally insulting me to my face, and my first reaction was to let them. Why would I do that? Because for years before that, people had either never heard of Afghanistan. That is how old I am, but there was, if you can imagine, there was a time when people had never heard of it. Or they saw my culture as something to be pitied, to be liberated, or to be eradicated from the face of the earth. The messages we got about who we are, about being Afghan, were almost never positive. As children of diaspora, many of us downplayed our Afghan identity. It was just easier not to explain why our parents were the way they were. I love them. Or what Ramadan was, or why we had the lunches, the best lunches at school. I still think sending a kid to school with banjan is kind of mean, but it's so good, I love it. Oh, banjan is eggplant. I'm following the norms, okay. But, people didn't know about our culture, and they didn't want to know. And at least that's how I felt. So I just blended in with mainstream culture as much as I could because it was just easier and it felt safer. The truth is, I grew up with very loving and supportive parents who had a common refugee story. My father is from Logar. My mom was from Kandahar. They met at the University of Kabul, were married, and came to the US in 1979. My sister and I were born in Los Angeles, and our first language was Pashto. But even in a diverse city like Los Angeles, nobody knew what to make of us. People said I had an accent, but whatever. My parents emphasized education, and they worked incredibly hard to make sure our daily needs were taken care of. But they didn't have the language for the experiences of anxiety, depression, and trauma that come with displacement from your homeland, not for themselves and not for their children who were navigating between two homelands. Growing up like this resulted in so many of us feeling like we're imposters, or like we have to code switch depending on who is around. I talk a lot about imposter syndrome. I'm talking about it tomorrow. Please come to that if you want. But the way I define it is, imposter syndrome is when the way you see yourself and the way the world sees you don't match up. And how many Afghans grew up feeling like that? Like the world didn't see our beautiful, rich, joyful, generous culture for what it is. So who could we go to when we ran into problems? We couldn't go to our parents the way our peers could go to theirs. So I say to be an Afghan in diaspora is to hold 1,000 secrets. When my body was touched by an extended family member before I even knew what consent was, I kept it a secret. When I was called a terrorist at school, I kept it a secret. And I learned then even when good things happened, I kept those a secret. When I came out to myself and realized that I was part of the queer community, I kept that a secret for a long time too. As a result of living like this, I withdrew. I learned that I could only be fully myself when I was by myself. So I did what a lot of us do. I became the dutiful daughter, the good friend to everyone else, the star student, and then the reliable employee, because so many of us fear that we'll burden the ones we love if we speak up. What is one of the most common phrases in your household? Don't answer that. What will people say? So it makes sense that we hide in order to fit in and belong. We fear rejection from our own community if we are too American, if we don't follow or even know all of our own cultural norms. And then we fear rejection from mainstream America if our names are too ethnic or if we're fasting while we're at work. And by the way, that's why one of the rituals I use when I start my women's groups that I run now is by having us share our names and the meaning or story behind them. I think Afghan names in particular are so poetic and beautiful. So please turn to your neighbor. No, I'm just kidding, don't do that. But how many of us have been teased for our names or hid them under some like American version? Even I ignored my middle name for most of my life because I thought it sounded too weird to my friends. For the record, my middle name is Roshana. I'm named after my father's mother. Oh yeah, how many of you do know the meaning of your own name or the names of your parents or your grandparents? Oh, so cute. So as you introduce yourselves this weekend, make sure to say your names proudly. I invite you to celebrate the meaning of your names and learn about each other. With that coworker who called us animals, eventually I mustered the courage to go back to him and say something, and the person didn't say anything. He just laughed in my face. And speaking up, that felt like a mistake at the time, but that was really a turning point for me. Because not that long ago, that was the first time I said it out loud. My family is from Afghanistan, and keep their name out of your mouth. You don't have to. You guys are cool. But because of that experience, I finally realized that I don't need to fit in with people like that. Why was I working so hard? I don't need to buy into the negative messages about who my people are. I get to define what it means to be Afghan because that's who I am. And you do too. In that moment, I learned that when you set your secrets free, they will do the same for you. I have no regrets about that time in my life. It actually made me an excellent therapist because guess what? Being able to hold secrets for others is a gift. But eventually I decided that there has got to be other Afghan women like me and other Afghans in general. I knew that was the missing piece of all this self-development work I had done over the years. You know, I had worked through my trauma. I had worked through my imposter syndrome. I had gotten married and invested in my relationships. I had difficult conversations with my family and was open with them about everything that I had been through. But this most fundamental part of me was still fragmented. And I just knew that if I could embrace this most deeply held secret, that I would feel whole. So I decided to take a chance and build a community that I never had, but then that is like its own whole scary thing, like pulling up to like an event full of Afghans and then like inviting Afghans into your space. I was like, who am I to hold this space? Like, who is going to accept me? What will they think when they see my beautiful hair, when they see my tattoos, my Americanized way of being? I look white. I'm queer. I was so white and American for so long. I haven't been out here doing this for this long. I turned my back on my own people. I was really, really scared, but I knew there had to be other people like me. Also, like, what if my family sees this on Instagram? But I went for it. I called you in anyway, and I figured that, you know what, if they don't like it, I'll just shut it down. No one will know about it. But one by one, my people found me. And imagine what it felt like that, you know, I was sitting here so terrified, and in less than a month, my inbox was full of messages from people saying, where has this been? I'm so glad you're doing this. I can't believe you're saying this stuff out loud. This is exactly how I feel. Usually these spaces are like this, but I don't feel that way with you. And still to this day, it blows my mind that Afghan women from all over the world reach out to me Either they got my name from someone, or they just found me online, or they Googled Afghan therapist thinking like nothing's gonna pop up. But it did, and now a lot of names pop up. Hey. And while I'm really proud of all of these different professional titles and all the different types of work that I do, I worked really hard to do that. What I'm most proud of is that I'm able to tell you my full story today without secrets. My name is Sara Stanizai. I'm a proud, queer, Afghan-American woman. I'm a sexual abuse and assault survivor. And that is something I never thought I would be able to stand in front of my people and say. I used to really admire people who could speak their truth out loud like that, and I still admire them, but now I'm one of them. Oh yeah, thank you. This feeling of integration, of arriving home, is why this is my life's work. I want to invite you all back to your culture on your own terms. You no longer have to leave parts of yourself at the door. You belong here. You belong here. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Yes, sorry. I couldn't not say it. It was like right there. You belong here. You deserve to have us celebrate every single part of you, and you don't need to hide. It is 2022. We do not have time for this. Afghanistan survives in each of us being fully ourselves. So I'll just leave you with this. If you feel disconnected from your culture, that's not an accident. If you feel you need to choose between being Afghan and being yourself, that's not your fault. The world has compelled us to hide the most unique things about us. The world tells us that our most valuable qualities don't have value. Your Afghan heritage is the most valuable thing about you. I want you to think of that secret thing that you don't want people to know about you. Don't say it out loud. But there is something that you don't want people to know. What if that was the thing that sets you free? Tashakkur. Thank you.